Coming up today on Bridges, we're going to talk about how to keep yourself mentally and physically fit. I'm so glad that you could join us for Bridges today. I'm Monica Schmelter, and today in this first segment, we're going to talk about mental health and how it's just as important as our physical health. And Dr. Mike Courtney is my first guest, and he founded the Branches Counseling Center. And Mike, I'm so glad to have you back on Bridges.
Thank you, Monica. It's good to be back. I enjoy doing this all the time.
It's been far too long.
It has,
but I'm glad
yes.
that you could come back and talk to us.
And that's because you didn't invite me, not because I was mad or anything.
Well, I should have invited you sooner. You know, when it comes to mental health, I know that this is an area that you've done a lot of work, and you've started branches, and you've got many locations for the counseling centers.
We do, yeah.
Tell us about mental health and how important it is for us to take care of that part of our lives.
Well, I'm glad you are having a program about that. I'm glad we're talking about it. I think far too often, especially in the church, it's something we kind of just take for granted. You know, if you get your heart right with Jesus, then everything else is going to be okay. But we don't think there's anything wrong with taking care of ourselves physically, with going to the doctor when there's something wrong, with monitoring. We have something going on, let's get that checked out. And so it stands to reason for me that God created us body, soul, and spirit. He is just as interested in the mental, emotional, behavioral part of our lives. And it's vital, especially for Christians, it's vital that we do a good job of staying healthy and making sure that we are aware of the resources that are available to us when we have emotional needs.
Yeah, because, you know, honestly, we all have emotional needs.
Yeah,
We all do, and that's one of the reasons that we're doing this program today, is just to open up that conversation that we all have emotional needs. We all have things that need to be addressed, and Mike, I was one of those people who, for a long time after I first got saved, felt like, well, if you just pray hard enough and if you just believe in Jesus enough, then all of the emotional stuff works out, except that I found that I still had what I would call emotional outbursts and fits of rage. I still had these problems that I felt like I needed to squelch, but I didn't know what to do. I kind of thought of as emotions as like bad or good. So let's talk about that a little bit if we could.
Yeah, that's interesting. We do have this kind of running inventory in our minds of what emotions are appropriate, what emotions are okay, particularly for believers, and what emotions we shouldn't have. My contention is that emotions are not bad or good. They just are. And they have the possibility on the whole spectrum of emotions of being bad or good. We deal with an issue often and it's a kind of a bandied about word by people that are bipolar. That's not just an emotional issue, that's a physiological, chemical issue as well. But it is an example of, we used to call that manic depressive. That people that they're depressed or they're on the manic side. Well, when they're on the manic side, they're wonderful. They're happy, they're outgoing, they get a lot of things done, they're energetic. But we came to understand that too much of a good thing, and so we recognize that all emotions have the potential to be negative, they have the potential to do harm, but they also have the potential to be very positive and to be helpful. Even things like anger and sadness and worry and those kinds of things. Even those things, I think God has a place for them, and they are a part of the healing process. Yeah,
you know, and I think they are too, and I've learned to, you know, embrace that and accept that. And I wanted to ask you about things like anxiety. Is that an emotion?
Anxiety is an expression of an emotion, I think. It's a feeling that comes out, and anxiety is a good place to talk about how the physical and the mental are connected. But anxiety is a physical reaction, a mental reaction to we have what we call primary and secondary emotions, to a primary emotion that's taking place. I'm fearful, I'm sad, I feel dislocated. Those kinds of things then can produce anxiety in me.
And a lot of people would say, but the Bible tells us not to worry, to be anxious for nothing. So then we're saying, but emotions, they can be a gift, they can be, properly. How do we know, like, how much is too much and what's a balance? How do we know?
Right. Well, I tell people I am an expert of knowing the appropriate emotional response. About 24 hours after I acted, then I look back and say, no, that wasn't the appropriate.
Hindsight is like really helpful.
Well, I think there are some key markers that we can look for when we're dealing with some type of emotion that could have negative consequences, like anger, like being anxious, like being fearful. There are certain markers that I think we can look for. Maybe here's 2 or 3 words that come to mind. Isolation. If this emotion causes me to begin to withdraw, to pull away, very often when I'm going through something like that, what I really need is to be connected with people. I need to be in church, those kinds of things. But when I find myself isolating, so isolation would be a good one. Obsession would be another good word. I just can't stop thinking about this. I can't let this thing go. It is eating at me 24 hours a day. I think that would be a good word. And then depression. There's nothing wrong with sadness, sorrow, with feelings of loss. But depression, when it begins to have an impact on me physically, emotionally, when it begins to do harm, then I would say my response is not appropriate. These are not healthy levels of emotions for this.
So what do we do if we find ourselves, Mike, if one of you that are watching or just whatever, if we find ourselves in a situation where, we are isolating ourselves, just being able to get out and connect with people and be in community just seems awful to us.
Right.
What do we do if we find ourselves in a situation that's like that? What is a healthy response in the middle of that challenging situation?
Yeah, that's good. My wife is an incredible person. She is wonderful.
She is.
She is a horrible counselor. Because she just says, well, tell him just to straighten up, or tell him just to feel better. Or, the problem is sometimes we know what to do.
That's right.
But being able to do that, making ourselves do that is a very difficult thing. I think there are some kind of very basic tools that we can put in place, and then we just kind of keep approaching those one step at a time. But these basic tools are, I use these often with people: change your thinking, change your behavior, change your location. Those 3 things are easy to remember. First of all, change my thinking. Paul says, whatever things are good, whatever things are noble, whatever things of good report, think on these things. So I find myself, Monica, I'm just dwelling on this. This person said something to me at church, and I just can't let that go. And now that's bringing up all kinds of issues from the past. I can't let this. So change my thinking. Make an intentional effort. And I don't mean this as a advertisement, but turn on bridges. I mean, make sure you're watching the right thing, that you're listening to the right kind of music. Change your thinking. The second thing is change your behavior. Do something different. Get up and move around and take on a project. Become connected with people. Just get busy about something. And finally, change your location. Literally, leave. Go take a walk around the block, or go visit somebody. Or if it's not always possible, if it's possible, go to another little town and visit a friend or something like that. Those 3 things are pretty simple and pretty important to change your thinking, change your behavior, change your location. Again, the hard part of that is most of us know that. Making ourselves do that when we need to is not quite as easy. And so in that case, I say, you do the next thing that's in front of you. You just take the next step. And sometimes you have to sit down and catch your breath and then take the next step again. But you just stay with that. You just continue to push forward.
And the things that you're saying are all things that, like, I've tried when I'm in those really challenging circumstances. And sometimes it's just so hard to make yourself do that, but it's such a gift to yourself. And sometimes I'll tell myself, I'm just going to feel so much better if I get up and I go take this walk. I'm going to feel so much better if I watch this kind of a Christian program, or if I listen to some upbeat Christian contemporary music.
Absolutely.
But it's like, it takes that amount of discipline from us to go ahead and do that, But doing those things, whether it's changing our thinking, our location, those things are helpful because they kind of interrupt that cycle that we've got ourselves in.
Yes. Yeah. I find to have some ready-made responses is very helpful. I can think of these things. We can have this conversation now while we're doing well.
Right.
When I'm in the slough of despond, it's hard for me to do
Yeah.
that. So to have some ready-made responses. One for me, as I've gone through some really difficult times and struggled with depression and those kinds of things, is I just developed a mantra that said, this is not healthy for me.
Amen.
And as that thought would come up, I would, rather than let myself dwell there, sometimes I would say out loud, Monica, this is not healthy for me. My wife and I have been married for 40 years now. Early on, she would say, what? Now she just says, oh, that's him again. But to literally say, this is not healthy for me. To have my Bible laying at a place where I know, okay, I don't have to look for it. I don't have to, I go to this place. To have a few friends, here's an important point, to have a few friends that I have called on a regular basis when I'm doing well, so now when I'm not doing well, the phone doesn't feel like it weighs 80 pounds. This is just a normal thing. I call my friend Robert 2 or 3 times a week, so it's not a big deal to call him now while the anxiety or the fear or the anger is harmful to me.
And you know, Mike, you said something. It's easy for us to talk about these things right now while we're doing well. And we all have moments that we're doing well and then moments that we're doing not so well. And even if a person, I found in my own life, even if I can do just one of the things that you're saying, like if it's just that bad, you know, like you said, your mantra is, this is just not healthy for me. There have been a few things in my life that I just felt like my own flesh and the devil would just torment me with this thought or that thought.
Right.
And I just started saying out loud, I'm just not going to let the devil torment me one more second. Like, even if that is true, and even if that happened in the past, I am not, God didn't create me for torment.
Right.
And it's that health wanting to come out, to just say, I just don't want to stay in this place. I think it's important that we all admit and recognize we all go through things. We all have these kinds of thoughts. And sometimes we just got to fight back.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that we tend to be like a pendulum, you know. We bounce from one side to the other. For years and years and years, in the church in particular, we would say, you just love God enough, you pray enough, and everything's going to be okay. And then we swing to the other side, and I make my living as a behavioral health counselor, but we swing to the other side where we have our fingers on our pulse constantly. We run to get help every time something's wrong. There's a balance in between. There is an important step of just saying, look, God is bigger than this, and I am better than this.
Amen.
And I am not going to succumb to this. Now, maybe the step I take is I go see a counselor or I go get help. Maybe that's what I do. But there is that initial element that says, I'm not going to continue to dwell where I am. I am going to look for someplace better that God has prepared for me.
And that's our part in this journey of staying mentally healthy. We are out of time, but I want to thank you so much for coming. We want you to stay with us. When we come back, we're going to take a look at taking care of our physical health.
You can purchase a copy of today's show for $15. Call us at 615-754-0039 or send a check to the address on the screen. Please mention the program number on the screen.
The blood of Christ is the only cure. It gets down to the root of every single thing that ails us. There's not an addiction, there's not a generational curse, there's not any root of sin. There's nothing that the blood of Jesus cannot cleanse.
Visit monicaschmelter.com to schedule Monica to speak at your event.
When I truly turned my heart to the Lord, He took every sin I ever did away from me.
God really is your other half. God, He's the only person who can really, fill those holes and cracks in your heart that you're so wanting someone to fill.
It's no good to have a big dream if you're not putting yourself in motion to go after that.
If you're just joining us today on Bridges, we've been talking about taking care of our mental health, and now we're going to talk about taking care of ourselves physically. And my guest today is Jennifer Brindley, and you probably know her as the host of Rise Up, and she is, but she's also now a registered dietitian. So Jennifer, good to have you back on Bridges. It's been forever.
I know, and I'm so excited to be here.
Well, we're excited to have you. You know, I think so many of us were always concerned, you know, with taking care of ourselves physically and the things that we eat and our nutrition. So let me ask you, because I know you're a registered dietitian now also, are there things that we can eat that will really physically make us feel better?
You know what? I think that I think there is a difference in the foods that we eat and how we feel. I truly do, because when you think about how God designed our body in such a way for the fruits and vegetables that He gave us initially in the garden, and how good we know those foods are, and how they just really do so many great things in the body. And then we go over to the other category of where man-made foods, you know, now we've taken the fruits and vegetables and we've kind of done some different things with it. And I always like to joke about potatoes. God gave us potatoes, but what did we do? We made French fries or hash brown casserole. And not that those foods are just terrible, but I think that if we neglect putting the good in our bodies, a lot of times we'll start to see that we feel different. We don't feel as good. Our energy levels aren't as high, and we just tend to just feel overall bad.
Does food also, does it affect us mentally?
I believe it does. There are studies that show that it can, and I think one of the biggest things that I see with people, maybe, you know, sometimes we hear that term, I have brain fog. You know, we have that.
I've said that before.
I have too. And if we look back at the times that maybe we felt like our brain was foggy, could it have been because maybe we didn't eat? Maybe we had too long in between our meals. I don't know about you, Monica, but if I go longer than 3.5 to 4 hours, that's usually like my cutoff without eating, I do tend to get a little edgy. I do feel like my brain's a little foggy, or like I'm just kind of like almost like a zombie.
You know, I think that for me, I start to recognize that I'm getting just a little bit of a headache, and you know, I don't think quite as clearly. So I definitely, if I skip meals, which I try not to do, but if I'm in a situation where that meal just gets skipped, I can definitely tell a difference in physically and my ability to think and respond in the way that I normally would.
Exactly. And when you think about it, who's going to act just cheery when you have a headache? I mean,
it's really hard.
Right. So, you know, if we're having those kind of symptoms, which are very common when your blood sugar starts to drop, people tend to get headaches, they tend to get a little edgy, brain fog, all those things. I mean, I'm not at the top of my game when I feel like that. I'm starting to feel, you know.
Yeah. And, you know, I think sometimes, Jennifer, for some of us, and I know for myself, before I really made the commitment to mostly eat healthy, and I'm by no means perfect. I want you all to know this. I'm by no means perfect. My goal is to be around 95% healthy and 5%, you know, special occasions and that sort of thing. But for me, prior to that journey, I felt tired and headachy most of the time, and I just accepted it as a normal part of getting older. Like, I didn't realize really that nutrition or working out might have anything to do with that.
And it really does have a lot to do with it. And I think that's a very common thing for a lot of people is, you know, even depression, when you talk about going to kind of that extreme, usually, you know, people are going to swing on one way or the other. They're either going to overeat or they're not going to eat enough. Right. And we tend to kind of go one way or the other, and it just depends on the individual. But that's definitely a symptom.
Yeah. How about like foods and that kind of thing for energy boosters and zappers? Because, you know, a lot of people are looking to increase their energy, but they don't know what to do.
Right.
What are some energy boosters?
Well, energy boosters are going to be those foods that don't have a lot of extra stuff in them. How many times have you looked at labels and thought, okay, I know what the first 2 ingredients are, but everything else looks like something maybe been made in a laboratory.
And honestly, Jennifer, I think most of the time I don't recognize most of the words. So things that don't have a lot of stuff added.
Right. So you can find that now in the grocery stores. You can find the maybe what we call the healthy section in the grocery store, and just start to look at labels, kind of get familiar with those foods that don't have a lot of different additives and preservatives, because what those additional ingredients can do is they can actually cause your liver, because your liver is actually going to have to filter through all that so that we don't die from those chemicals. So if we're constantly putting in foods that have a lot of additives, a lot of preservatives, and all those things that our body doesn't recognize, then it's going to naturally cause us to feel tired because it's using more energy.
So what you're saying then, we would lose energy, but it's making our liver, I guess, work harder as well?
Right, because our liver's
to
going to
filter it?
filter all that stuff out. So that's going to zap our energy. So that's why a lot of times, if you notice, if we have something bad, I mean, I can't really testify that I've felt just great after I had something just really like a bad meal, you know. I can say I usually feel kind of, you know, sluggish, and then also how what we eat affects or can affect us mentally, because we do that whole, some people do that whole around the mountain, oh, I shouldn't have ate that, and then we beat ourselves up. And that's draining too.
Oh, it is very draining, and it's a cycle,
right?
You know, that we can get ourselves into. So I've always said, you know, if you're going to eat it, just eat it and own it. Like, don't shame yourself afterward. Just do that and move on. But I think, like you, definitely, you know, if you look even at the typical holiday meals, like after Thanksgiving or whatever, people have to go take a nap. Like, they are so lethargic because all of these great things have been eaten in such big quantities.
Right, and it affects our blood sugar levels. So when we talk about that affecting us, how does it affect us mentally in terms of clinically? Because when you eat too much food or too many things that have a lot of sugar, we're going to get that sugar high momentarily, but then our sugar levels are going to drop and bottom out. And that's when we get the headache and the fatigue and all those other symptoms.
Yeah. And I think what I used to do to compensate when I would get that fatigue after having sugar and that initial high and moving on, I would have more sugar.
Right.
You know, and a lot of people, they really are looking for lots of energy, and I see that, like, the energy drinks, the sales are like just spiking. And I've seen people, they've got one energy drink in their hand and one in their bag, and this is kind of how they're fueling themselves.
Right.
Are energy boosters, are they good? Are they helpful to us physically and mentally?
You know what? I'm glad you brought that up, because I don't want anybody to be misled about calling it energy boosters. So you're right. There are energy boosters that they're marketing that are not good. But then there are natural foods that God's given us that will naturally boost our energy, which are fruits and vegetables and all those things that we get in the garden.
Yeah, fruits and vegetables, but not brownies and candy.
Right. They may give you a 5-minute boost.
Right. Well, yeah, if that, and then that cycle of, oh my goodness, I shouldn't have done that, and that sort of thing. Okay, so another thing, Jennifer, that we hear a lot about that they say will help us physically and mentally is to drink lots of water.
Yes.
How much water?
Well, for the average adult, I usually recommend 64 ounces a day, just for the average person.
64 ounces, okay.
8-ounce glasses, and you can spread it out throughout the day. I wouldn't wait all day and then drink it all at night.
No.
You know, have you ever drank a lot at night and
I
then
have,
you're up 3 or 4 times, and that affects your sleep?
Not a good idea.
Right. But just spread it out throughout the day, and a good way to monitor that, if you're just getting started, is to get a water bottle and just know, okay, I've had one, you know, if you get a 32-ounce water bottle, then you know I'm going to fill this up twice, and I knew I got my 64 ounces, because if I don't drink, like, out of the water bottles that I normally get, I can't keep up with how much I've had.
No, because you kind of lose track. And I know, and I've wondered this before, and I've heard other people ask this particular question, but what if it's not water? You know, what if it's unsweet tea? What if it's lemonade? Is it all liquid that would count towards 64 ounces, or?
Well, you know, there's a fine line with that. Naturally, yes, it will keep us hydrated, and that's good. But water has so much nutrition in it that we don't realize that's not in other drinks.
Okay.
Water by itself, just the way it's made up of minerals, and when you add stuff to water, you actually deactivate the minerals, so you're not going to get the nutritional benefit. But yes, we still want to enjoy other things, you know, having a glass of tea or, you know, things like that that have water in it, it's fine. But if you want to benefit really nutritionally, I would drink pure water.
Okay, so you wouldn't want to just drink all your liquid 64 ounces like in unsweet tea.
Right. And I've had a lot of people too that I've worked with over the years that have, but prior to us kind of going over that key principle, suffered from headaches, fatigue, low energy level, and then when they began to increase their water, they noticed all that began to subside.
Yeah, and I think those are just things sometimes that we don't think about. And one of the things that I've heard a lot about recently, you know, well, and especially when you're working out physically, you don't want to let yourself get dehydrated.
Right.
How would a person know if they are dehydrated? What would those symptoms look like?
Well, you know, it varies from person to person, but most people experience like that dull headache that could come and go, all the way up to a full migraine. They also can also feel hungry, because, you know, we have that part in our brain, the hypothalamus, that doesn't know the difference between hunger and thirst. So if we're not drinking a lot of water, we may feel hungry all the time, and that can be a symptom of dehydration.
No, I didn't know
fatigue.
that.
So those low energy levels, all that, all the way up into like losing equilibrium, dizziness. I mean, that's like really going to be
To the extreme.
dehydrated.
So if we stay hydrated, we can hopefully avoid those things.
Right.
We've got just a couple minutes left. You brought an audio CD with you that I'd love for you to tell us about.
Yes, this is called Simple Nutrition for Magnificent Health. And basically, it's just going to give us some really good, solid key principles to making it simple.
Okay.
You know, so nutrition tips, keeping it simple, not all the fluff and the different fad things to do, but because we want to be healthy.
Right, and I think one of the things that's hard for most people, Jennifer, I know myself, when you're also working a full-time job and adding life to all of that, if it takes forever to understand the nutrition or how to put it together, I'm just not going to do it.
Right. We're going to go for whatever's easy. And because easy is good right now.
Absolutely.
We got to go for easy because our lives are so busy.
Yeah, simple, easy, convenient. And if we follow what you put together on that audio, it's going to help us feel better.
Feel better, energy levels go up, and just overall be healthy.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
And sharing with us today. We are out of time. We've got to go, but we say goodbye and God bless you.
Log on to www.ctntv.org, where you can make a prayer request, view our program guide, see who's on bridges, or even watch one of Monica's latest teachings. Log on to www.ctntv.org.
The blood of Christ is the only cure. It gets down to the root of every single thing that ails us. There's not an addiction, there's not a generational curse, there's not any root of sin, there's nothing that the blood of Jesus cannot cleanse.
Visit monicaschmelter.com to schedule Monica to speak at your event.
For more information on a guest, visit our website, ctntv.org.